You're very welcome, listeners, to the Locker Room podcast. It's been a little while since we had all three of us together. This is the 44th, and we said we'd have to look back on such a brilliant tournament and obviously a dramatic match the other night, the Euro 2020 final. We've got the view from London, the English view from Ross Bennett. Ross, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Ciaran. Looking forward to today.
I bet you are. And then we've got the rest of the United Kingdom view then from Joe Coulter from Northern Ireland. Or Joe, I better say Ireland, or there might be some listeners who will be ringing me up and having words.
Oh, you'll be in trouble.
I'll be in big trouble.
You'll be in trouble there, Ciaran.
Like Sean, poor old Sean Kavanagh, my accountant.
Exactly, Ciaran.
It'll probably be Stevie Porter ringing me up.
Guaranteed, Stevie will be ringing you up. Yeah, it was a very interesting game tactically. Obviously, as an Irish person who comes from the north of Ireland, I was sort of on for England at the beginning of the game, but as the game went on, my allegiance has slightly moved towards Italy. So I think we'll discuss that a little bit later, Ciaran.
Sorry. Okay, we'll move on swiftly, Joe, because I thought you may have said that you were supporting England there for a second, so we'll just switch on from that and we may have to come back to that later. Okay, just before we get into that, lads, I just want to mention about Ripped. So Ripped is a software platform built for performance coaches and organizations. They've come on board with us again, so thanks very much to Ripped and Cormac. With easy to use programming tools and training load, well-being and nutrition monitoring via the Ripped app. All of your coaching tools are in one place, streamlining your coaching, making it more accessible for your clients and athletes, and providing you with insights you need to optimize performance. To find out more, head over to www.ript.app, that's RYPT.app, and use the code LOCKERROOM to get you 2 months free trial. That's LOCKERROOM, all capitals, all one word. Alternatively, head over to dailysportscience.com/podcast and you get all the information there. So thanks to Cormac and the lads as always. Ross, I suppose first place to start as a guardian, we'll try and kind of keep an eye on the game from a coaching perspective, just to kind of differentiate. We are a coaching organization and coaching podcast. The starting lineups were very, very interesting, where Gareth Southgate, I thought personally he would have and should have kept with his previous lineup from the semi-final of 4 defenders. He went with 3 central defenders. Now, every time I see a 3-4-3 like that, really I'm thinking, well, that's a 5-2-3 or a 5-2-2-1 in some ways, with Mason Mount and Raheem Sterling playing behind Harry Kane. I mean, the wing backs did brilliantly. Trippier on the right and Luke Shaw on the left. But do you think that was a mistake?
Very interesting, Kiers, because before the game when I saw the lineups, I spoke to a few people and I said I wasn't sure about it. I really wasn't. I know we went the 3 to match up Germany, like for like, but he did something different here to obviously try to do something different to go at Italy. But I wasn't sure. I felt the same thing. However, the way the team started and where the goal came from, particularly in terms of stretching Italy across the pitch, and they couldn't get across to stop the cross, and then the other wing back got in, and obviously great finish, Luke Shaw to finish the goal. I thought it was genius in that sense. We went at Italy, we were aggressive in the first half an hour, fullbacks got high up the pitch. It was like a back 3 to start with, but as the game went on, I think the formation definitely hindered us in terms of dropping too deep, and it did become a back 5. So I think it was very, very well done, and it created a fantastic lightning start that nobody expected, really, England to be 1-0 up within 2 minutes. But as the game went on, I think it definitely hindered us, and that's where maybe a change was needed slightly quicker, which we'll come on to.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I was getting worried at one stage where, now, I have to say, obviously, I'm an Irishman living in London, living in England the last nearly 10 years. I've got a little boy, here with me now, and my wife is English and Sri Lankan heritage, a little bit different, but still English born. So I'm interested in this team. Let's say that, and I'm interested, Joe, in this team as a new and slightly different England team, where a lot of ethnic diverse young players standing up for kind of civil civil rights and stuff, as regards Marcus Rashford with helping to feed school children, and Jadon Sancho opening soccer schools and helping with schools in London. So I like a lot of characters from this team. I think they represent what's good about England, let's say, and the opposite to the kind of Brexit, the Brexit Britain, the lager louts that we see.
Yeah.
So I do like this team. I'm not saying I supported them, but I liked them.
Yeah, and I think that's true, Ciaran. And when you look at that team, when you look at the starting 11 there, without immigration, that team isn't possible. The quality of that team isn't possible, and it's pretty much you've got a lot of English-born players. Obviously the majority of them are English-born players, but you have players too that have Irish backgrounds. You've got Kane there. I think his dad's from Galway. You've got Rice there as well. I think Phillips, his grandmother maybe is Irish as well. Maguire obviously has Irish heritage too. A few others as well, and then you've got a lot of players from the kind of Jamaica, from the Caribbean area. So you've got a really good, diverse ethnic mix of players, and I think. Look, as an England fan myself, coming from the north of Ireland, in the past we would have tended to maybe definitely not support England, but you can now see, that it is full of players from different backgrounds, and I think that can only be good, going forward. And in the environment that we're in, with Brexit and with all this stuff going on here on Twitter recently, with the racial abuse that the three lads got for missing the penalties. And you're kind of thinking, when they did miss the penalties, you're kind of thinking, because in the back of your head, these boys are going to get abused. They're going to get racially abused on Twitter. And that whole thing now, it's gone on. And, certain politicians haven't really backed the England players taking the knee. And there's been a bit of, fire back today with Priti Patel. And, it's not good when the leadership of your country isn't backing anti-racist things that the England team are doing.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, it's a point that's further down the discussion, but I love to see this, because you've got the government now at loggerheads with the English national team, and the English national team have the biggest microphone of all, maybe like amongst the people, maybe even bigger than the government, whereby Tyrone Mings writes out a tweet and rightly calls Priti Patel a hypocrite for her stance on gesture politics about taking the knee and stuff like that. A lot of people will see that from Tyrone Mings, and a lot of people will support that, and I think that can only be good. But I was getting concerned, Ross, halfway through the first half, because I was looking at the game with my wife and I was saying, whoa, this is a different England. This is an England that are controlling the game, making Italy look very, very average. I was shocked at how poor Italy were at that time. I think Insigne took a shot at one stage from 35 yards out, far too far out. The goal wasn't on at all. It just kind of trickled wide. His teammates gave out to him. He kind of gestured back at them. I mean, England were in total, I'm not going to say total control of the game, because they didn't have as much possession, but they looked quite secure out of possession, didn't they?
Yeah, they're very secure, and it comes back to the point where, like, I remember that point with Insigne. He's having a row with Jorginho, but he had no options. He had no one to slip through. They didn't have any ideas. We were getting pressure up the pitch, which was good. We had Mason Mount nicking the ball in their half, in the Italian half. We had Declan Rice going higher, winning the ball back higher up the pitch, and it meant that when we had the ball back, we had options to actually go at Italy and counter and try and affect their back line and try and score. The problem is what happened, after about 30, 35 minutes, the warning signs came and we started dropping deeper. And Harry Kane was the highest man, well inside the England half. When we won the ball back, we had nobody to play forward to, no outlet, and Italy started to put pressure on. And Chiesa had a great chance on his left foot that just went wide. Insigne was coming closer. There were warning signs at the end of that first half that we took our foot off the gas and we went to a back five and we stopped pressing high up the pitch, and it caused us problems. It really did.
I think it's worth mentioning, Ross, set out the difference between your back five and your back three, because even though the formation is a 3-4-3, like I said at the beginning, three central defenders can quickly become, instead of those two wide wing backs being really good, effective attacking players down either line, pinning back Chiesa and pinning back Insigne, it nearly became where they drift back into a back five then, and then you've got a little bit of problem, don't you?
Yeah. And what happens is when your wing backs are being aggressive and especially out of possession, they sometimes lock on to the fullback of the other team, which is fine if you get people shuffled over. Your centre halves, people like Harry Maguire, John Stones, were comfortable enough, Carl Walker definitely, to step onto the wide player and sometimes go 3v3 with the protection of the two sitters in front of them. That's what they needed to do and be aggressive. They knew that Italy didn't have loads of space, pacing behind, so they could deal with any ball that went. But as soon as you go to the back five being occupied by three front players, and we've got the sitting players, you're camped near the edge of your box and you've got no outlet. You've got people dropping deep. So that was the problem. And fair play to Italy. They got a foothold in the game. Their midfield three players were fantastic. I don't think that the lineup allowed us to dominate the middle of the pitch when we were getting dominated in our own half. But it definitely come from the back five being way too deep.
Yeah, I think the big, you mentioned Chiesa, and we'll certainly speak about him as regards the second half. But even in the first half, I just felt it was like there wasn't a sea change, but gradually and just bit by bit, England ceded possession, and the England, in some ways, like the three, diamond, you could nearly call them only three players, but of Verratti, Jorginho and Barella, young Inter Milan centre midfielder, just bit by bit, the three of them started to get into the game, holding on to possession, little combinations, little passes, and they still weren't creating chances other than the Chiesa chance with his left foot, but it just meant that they were getting a foothold in the game, and you could see all over the pitch, Italy were beginning to settle more and more and settle, and England obviously then the opposite, were beginning to get unsettled at that stage. Like coming into halftime, then you as a coach, as a manager, like what do? You have a choice of kind of stick or twist, and it seemed like Southgate he chose to stick, really.
Yeah, I think, look, hindsight's a great thing, and we look back and say, well, he should have changed to the 4, and he should have preempted that Mancini was, which we'll come on to, was very clever, and preempt that something needed to change. But I think what he didn't do, because I probably would have stuck in that situation. We're 1-0 up against Italy. We've been under the cosh for 10 minutes, but we've also caused them problems. But what we actually need to do is make sure the personnel, regardless of the system on the pitch, and go back to playing on the front foot and get Trippier and get Luke Shaw high up the pitch. We know we've got pace in behind. Get our midfielders winning the ball high up the pitch and locking on, and maybe bring Mount to more of a central position so that we can match up the three midfielders. So even if you didn't change system or personnel, you've got the players on the pitch to still be aggressive, like we was at the start of the game. But as you know, we came out. That wasn't the case. Already we was on the back foot. I think once the stats came up 74% Italy, we were just happy to be in deep inside our own half and just try to keep them in front of us, which they've got too much qualities. At some point, something's going to give. So I think I would have said to the players, we need to get higher up the pitch. We need to lock on high. I made an active attempt to get personnel, trying to stop them playing out.
Ross, can I just ask you, sorry for jumping in there, is the root cause also not that England don't have those central midfielders that are playmakers, that are really, really comfortable, in possession? And we've seen in previous tournaments where England have knocked out. You only have to look at the last tournament, the World Cup, where you had the likes of when they were playing Croatia in the semi-final. And Modric is running the midfield because he's so comfortable on the ball. It's so easy for him. Do England have that type of player? I know that, 10, 15 years ago, they mightn't have had that type of player, and they're trying to look for that type of player to keep possession of the ball. But are we still going back to that, where opposition midfields who are good teams are dominating them through possession? That's still a problem?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I mean, you look at the Italian midfielders, Keir's mentioned the personnel there, very, very good technical players, very, very good at dominating the midfield. However, I think if you have someone like Mason Mount that comes more central into that midfield area, who's a very good player. I've known him, worked with him from when he was 14, very, very good technical player. Declan Rice gets a bit of stick in terms of playing sideways and backwards, but can handle the ball, especially, in my opinion, more than someone like Jordan Henderson.
Is Mount good enough to control a game against top-class international players?
Is the England midfield good enough to Probably not, Joe, but I think if you have the personnel in there at least to match them up for like and get the bodies in the middle of the pitch, I think you'd have more of a chance. Like we saw in the first half, we saw Declan Rice nicking the ball off Jorginho high up the pitch. We saw Mason Mount putting pressure high up the pitch. I think you give yourself a chance. I mean, they're probably better technical players, but I don't think we even got into that battle because we allowed them to have loads of time and space on the ball. You put pressure on any player, you make it difficult for them. You put good pressure on any player, you make it difficult for them. So we didn't ask the question enough in the second half, in my opinion.
I think as a coach and as a manager, like the setup and the individuals is obviously both things massively important. But I think as well, like you mentioned about, well, what do you say to them? How are you actually how are you coaching them as regards what you want them to do on the pitch? Because I don't think England have a Jorginho. I don't think they have a Verratti. But I mean, Declan Rice is a fine player. I thought he had a really, really good final. As you said, Mason Mount could be utilised better as regards. I thought he ended up being solid defensively and everything and doing a lot of work. But like as we saw for Chelsea during the season in Champions League final and all, he can be a brilliant attacking player as well. So they won't be able absolutely controlled midfield. But when was the last time in a major football tournament final, like the home nation gets 30% of possession or 35% of possession? So I think that's where maybe Southgate might have some regrets as regards, okay, you don't even have to change the setup, but as you mentioned, Ross, you could just tell Luke Shaw and Ciaran Trippier to keep doing what they were doing and keep getting up the line. I mean, the first goal was incredible, wasn't it? Like it worked an absolute treat and Shaw, came in off the left-hand wing and it was perfection as a from a coaching manual. So I think even just to get those players to play a little bit, Ross, on the front foot and be positive and be proactive and all, I think would have helped, Joe, what did you think of the battle-hardened Bonucci and especially Chiellini, the two centre-backs?
Yeah, Ciaran, they're absolutely brilliant. These boys play on the edge, and I seen a tweet of the two of them in a I think it was in a bed in a hotel with the Euro Cup in between them. So they do spend a lot of time with each other, and they have a great understanding. But if you look at Chiellini, if he was born during the Roman Empire time, he would be a centurion or something like that. He'd be the commander of one of those major Roman armies. So really, but brilliant technically too, Ciaran. He comes out with the ball and he plays slightly on that left-hand side as a centre half, and he's able to distribute as well, very comfortable on the ball, and obviously great in the air. And you can see psychologically too, I think it was the quarter-final when they went to penalties, where he sort of, he got the better of, I forget who did they play in the quarter-final?
Semi-finals, isn't it?
Sorry, the semi-final where they were doing the toss-up, and he was, and that was all psychological. That was all psychological, wasn't it, Ciaran? Where he sort of hugged him and all, and that's the start of the psychological battle. So brilliant player, and he has it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge respect to him, especially, and both of them. I think the spark of regeneration for Italy as well, Ross, really was Chiesa, Federico Chiesa. And I remember watching his dad in the 96, Euro 96, I think, or else it was World Cup 98. And he was a brilliant kind of inside forward for Parma. And he went on to have a really good career. And he was just a ball of energy. And like Chiesa, for a guy who's age 23 for Juventus, like what a young player. And he caused England, he was the one really causing the trouble, wasn't he?
Yeah, my father-in-law, Italian from the south, big Juventus fan, has always said to me about Chiesa. Chiesa's a top player.
Really? Wow.
So going into, you see ball of energy and probably the only one that could really threaten England, really from a physical perspective, getting in behind, running at the back four, coming into great positions in the pocket. But the thing that's most important about him is how clinical he is. You saw the goal against Spain, against the runner play in the semi-final. What a finish, bending into the corner.
Brilliant.
He comes first half, he drives inside on his left foot, whiskers away from being an equaliser. That probably should have been a goal, really. And then another one in the second half, he cut inside the box and bent it around. Great save from Pickford in all fairness.
Yeah.
So, like, you give that man any space in and around the box, like you're more or less going to be a goal down. So he was the one that, especially when we have to talk about Mancini, the change, really simple change. He brought into the left hand side and he caused murders. I mean, Walker was struggling. Trippier was pinned back there. He was coming inside. No one knew who to pick him up. They couldn't handle him. So he was the real spark. And when he, went off at some point, that was the actual time England got a bit more of a foothold in the game later on and started getting a bit of belief. So the psychological side is massive. You see already there, I know Bernardeschi, who came on, probably wasn't as good as him or causing England as many problems, but that one player allowed England then to get a bit of momentum and feel like they might be able to nick the game. So it just shows you how many psychological factors come into these games.
Yeah, it was amazing, really. Just the little differences into the game, the little events, and the ebb and flow of the game goes up and down. And like we remember in our time with London and all, a goal or a black card or a turnover, and all of a sudden it's a different game. I mean, the bringing off, we have to say that Mancini's, I suppose he was, kind of instigating things, whereas Southgate was probably reacting a little bit, where Mancini brought off Immobile, which was quite predictable. I mean, he didn't do anything against Maguire and Stones, but bringing him off and kind of getting his players, like Chiesa was drifting into the centre, Insigne was drifting into the centre, but also Insigne was dropping deeper into midfield, overloading the midfield area, and it meant that they had an overload there in order to transition the ball better, which, in the end, Chiesa got into the game more. Ross, just about the goal then, you have a little issue with Mason Mount maybe at the back post.
Yeah, look, the goal was come in, and Italy thoroughly deserved their goal. There's no bones about that. They could have had a couple. The amount they put in England on the back foot. Just before we go into the goal, Kiers, I mean, Mancini was under a little bit of pressure. Maybe bring off Insigne. He wasn't having a great game.
Yeah.
He hit 3 or 4 shots that he shouldn't really have hit, but there weren't options for it, especially at the end of the first half, into the second half. But he stood strong, and he was right to take Immobile off. Immobile, throughout the whole competition, I thought was one of their weaker frontline players. And the combination, when he changed things around, of Insigne going into a false 9 and number 9, worked wonders. So very, very good and stuck strong to his players there. The goal, Mason Mount has to do better. There's no bones about that. He's let someone beat him on a header. It's bounced. It's come off a flick on. He's beat him on the inside shoulder. And look, I know that's not Mason Mount's game, but you're in a European final against top Italian players. These fine margins cost you the game, and someone following in Bonucci as well. We have to be better in the box. I don't know whether you have someone on the post. It looked like we had less numbers. We had light numbers in the box. Mount gets beat. Pickford, not a bad save in all fairness. He's parried it onto the post. Joe might disagree, but it comes back and it just starts.
I thought Pickford could have done a little bit better with that one, Ross. I thought he'd seen it. I thought he'd seen it early, and he could have full palmed it, maybe to get it away from the post. Yeah.
It looked like the contact was slightly behind him by the time he got his hand to it. So I think that's why it's kind of gone shallow. But look, Mount has to do better with that header. He can't let him attack his inside shoulder and score like that. If he's got to beat him in an air race. In a race in the air, fair enough, but he can't come on the inside shoulder and head it in. He's got to be stronger than that defensively, I think.
Yeah. Lads, I must just mention our sponsor, the show sponsor, Ripped again. So Ripped asks, are you tired of the limitations of using Excel and email to deliver programs? Ripped can help you simplify the creation and delivery of training programs, making it easier for you to provide everything your clients and athletes need, all at your fingertips. With training load, well-being and nutritional monitoring, so you can get the full picture of your athletes and players' performance. To find out more, head over to rip.app, use the code LOCKERROOM, all capitals, all one word, to get your 2 months free trial, and check out those guys. They do some brilliant work. Just quickly then, Chiesa going off injured. I was personally devastated because I thought I just love watching him. He's such a brilliant player, and I just love his creativity and physicality and everything. England started to come back into it more. I mean, we speak briefly about it afterwards, but you could actually hear a pin drop in the stadium at that stage. I couldn't believe how the English home support weren't like getting behind their team more, and like they were kind of thinking we're losing 1-1. Like it's a drawn match. You're in a European final. You have 60,000 people nearly behind you. This is a once-off chance. I couldn't believe there wasn't more, support behind him at that stage. I was really surprised.
I think though the tension, Kears, of the game. Like I've never been involved with England, obviously in a final since I've been alive. And my wife, as you know, is half Italian. She felt so tense as an Italian. The Italian fans were so tense. Like I just think everybody thought at that point, especially when Chiesa went off and England got a little bit of a foothold in the game, not dominated at all, but had chances. I think everyone felt that it could go either way. It was that tense, you know, and any little you know, chance in the box for any team. So I just think people were just so, you know, so surreal for them that in that situation, and people didn't know what to do. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if the crowd got behind them, then
what about Ross? What Gareth Southgate had to do then, because he switched back to a 4-3-3. He took off Declan Rice for Jordan Henderson, brought on Saka, took off Trippier. I mean, what are you, as a coach, football coach, what are you doing in hindsight? You know, how are you approaching that? You're coming to the end of the game. Obviously, it's going to extra time, or you think it is. You've got Sancho on the bench. You know, Rashford, okay, maybe not. Grealish. Phil Foden, was he injured? Or I hear somebody mention.
I think he was injured,
okay, fine. Okay, so you've got, you know, Bellingham, Grealish, Sancho, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, first things first. I wouldn't have took Rice off at the time. I thought he gave the ball away. He tried to run with the ball at times to transition the ball when he won it back, and he got caught. And I think that was something you could have told him at half time. Listen, win the ball back, play a forward pass. That's your game. But I wouldn't have put Henderson on for him. I've had debates with this and people in the office. I think I personally don't think Rice or Henderson is a better player than Rice. I think Rice is a similar type, better technically, a bit more mobile. So I wouldn't have made that change at that time. I think he was right to go to the 3, although a 4-3-3, but he should have done it a little bit earlier, I think. But when the Chiesa went off, it was kind of the time to try and galvanise. So he brought on Saka, who had an okay game. But I definitely would have got Grealish on the pitch probably a little bit earlier, and maybe then looked at taking Rice off. So going into, you know, without Henderson on the pitch, going into extra time with Grealish, Saka, Sterling, Kane still on the pitch, I think it would have maybe swung the momentum a little bit that we're going to try and go and win this game.
I think, see, my issue in general is that I think Gareth Southgate and the English setup they're kind of coaching and leading by blueprint. You know, that there's a set kind of manual there, a coaching manual. Everything is in place. The leadership is brilliant. Joe, and we'll speak about it in a minute. Their relationship with the media is great. You know, they're great young lads. Everything is good, set up well, and everything. But then, like, stuff happens in a major final. Just things get thrown at you and different things and whatever. And it's like, okay, well, how do you respond now? And I think Dave, like, it's well known. England have modelled their approach on France, you know, 2018 and even 2016, Portugal 2016, where both their managers, Deschamps and Santos, set up strongly defensively, you know, are quite secure, limit the other team scoring, and then hope that one of your kind of superstars, you know, on the break or whatever, or set piece gets a goal. And it that will bring you very, very far. But, like, to me, not using, like in Germany, they cannot believe how Jadon Sancho is not used as much, because he's a superstar, absolute superstar. Grealish, okay, defensively, Grealish is not as secure as some of the other players, you know, Mason Mount, even Saka. But, like, Grealish can do things. There's just an energy there on the pitch when he comes on in the stadium. The fans want him. That to me is the point where I'm thinking, okay, we've never had a better chance to win an international tournament. Now is the time. Now is where I'm going to actually take a little bit of a chance. And with England's history in penalties, I want to avoid penalties. Let's go and win it in extra time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was thinking the exact same thing I was saying to my wife at the time. I do not want penalties, because even though we had a bit more success 3 years ago in Russia, you know, you want to try and win the game. Everyone wants to try and win the game in normal time. The thing is, though, Kears, I think that, Sancho has done very well in the Bundesliga. Bellingham has as well. It is different. The Bundesliga, it's a different type of football. He's obviously seeing those players day in, day out. He knows how they train. He's making assessments on the best players he feels is the best to go and play and win that game. But I do agree that we should have taken off at least a defensive midfielder and gone more attacking, of course. But I don't think he knows his best team. I don't think he knows the best 11. I think there's so many players there who are similar in ilk, and he could probably put two of them in, take two of them out, and probably have a similar type team. So I think that's something that hopefully he'll learn over the next couple of years going into or before Qatar, hopefully.
Yeah, I think, Ross, just on that point, I think there seems to be like a culture of safety and security that Southgate has, and I think he seems to be a little bit risk averse, as you've said there. He didn't. Grealish didn't get much game time. Foden didn't get as much game time as we would have thought. Obviously, he started the first game, Foden. England are more tactically better than they used to be. There's no doubt about that. When they come into these big tournaments, they're tactically better than they used to be. They used to just rely on their individual players, the likes of Beckham, the likes of Scholes, the likes of Shearer. They are better tactically. There's no doubt about it. But I think that Southgate has to take risks at some time throughout the game. He has to take a big risk, 60, 65 minutes, 70 minutes to go and win the game. Because you can't win these tournaments by just defending and having a good defensive structure and a good setup. Somewhere along the line, you have to take a risk. Hopefully he learns that going into the next tournament.
Joe, I think you're spot on. The thing is, what you have to remember is that England have never been in that situation ever. So this is a massive learning curve for everybody. I know the FA do a lot of performance problem solving, scenario-based stuff. But until you're in the heat of the moment in Wembley, as Ciaran said, you could hear a pin drop. You've been on the back foot for a long time, and I think throughout the tournament, the way he set the team up did work. We were very, hard to beat. 2 goals in the whole tournament is incredible defensively. So. It's things that they will take on board, I'm sure, and look to plan for the future and have these certain scenarios that if it happens again, hopefully they react in a different way or preempt and set the team up in a different way.
Yeah. Joe, we'll do another 5 minutes, lads. Joe, he certainly took a big risk with the penalty takers. What were your thoughts on that, as regards bringing on the 2 guys at the end and with Saka, and what did you think?
Yeah, so obviously, bringing on Rashford. For me, bringing on Rashford, I don't really have a big problem with that because he is the penalty taker for United. I think with Sancho, if you look at him with Dortmund, I think Ciaran he's only taken 1 penalty in the last couple of years. So to have a problem with the Sancho one. Now, overall, if you bring on players that haven't kicked the ball, I don't think any of them kicked the ball in the whole tournament, and you're bringing them on the last minute. Are they ready for that? Have they taken the atmosphere in? It's just a big ask, because also psychologically, them boys are probably thinking, well, Southgate hasn't trusted me in this tournament so far because he hasn't given me any time on the pitch, but now he's bringing me on to hit a penalty kick. So it does, it's a tricky one for Southgate, and obviously if it pays off, it's brilliant. It's a mastermind. It's genius if it pays off. But it just didn't pay off this time. You look at the other players who are there too. You've got Grealish, you've got Sterling. Maybe they should have taken a penalty.
Joe, just on that, I mean, you've got to remember Sancho did start one of the games, so he did play. He did play at least one of the games.
Semi-final.
He did. Yeah.
I think the thing is, right, is this is what I've heard, obviously not 100% confirmed. They did a lot of work on penalty practice in training, as you'd imagine, especially England going in. And a lot of the staff analysed all of the players' penalties throughout all those sessions. And it was agreed amongst players and staff that they were the 5 best penalty takers that people wanted to take a penalty. So it was an agreement amongst everyone. So I think anyone can miss a penalty. I do have issues with people like Sterling not stepping up and taking a penalty. I mean, he's one of your most experienced players, one of your better players, forward line players. I think he should be in the mix anyway. But they've tried to go on methodical about it. They've tried to take a bit more of a scientific approach, and it hasn't paid off. I think, and anyone can miss a penalty. England are bad at penalties anyway. I don't think people should really be saying anything about penalties. I think there's more gripes during the game. We had opportunity to take the game to it a little bit more, as opposed to penalty kick shootouts.
It was a really interesting one, Ross, and I was going to actually ask you about that. you know, and you've answered it already, really, but they took a very scientific approach where they did the stats, who scores the most amount of penalties, where they're putting it, everything like that. Very, very interesting. And like, we're both sports scientists working and in performance departments in professional football. So, you know, we know about all this kind of stuff. The question is, I suppose, is that what about the feel for the game? You know, and I spoke to Paul Furlong the last day about it, and he just kind of said himself that, you know, sometimes, yeah, you might be down to take a penalty, but you just may not feel it that day. You know, you might have given away 2 balls just beforehand. You're a little bit kind of, you know, not confident, or I found it interesting when like Jack Grealish came out on Twitter against Roy Keane today and just said that he actually wanted to take a penalty, but Saka was told he is taking it. Whereas normally we've seen coaches saying, okay, who wants to take one? Now that can be a problem as well, because every Aegis can put up his hand and go, oh, I'll take it, even though he shouldn't. But look, I think predicting penalty, you know, winners and scores is very difficult. I was there on the couch telling my wife the Jorginho penalty. I said, look, this guy does not miss. If it's not possible, he's just like, nobody can stop his penalties. It's a definite goal. Forget about it. You know, so it's.
No, I think you're spot on there, and I think like, because when I think Sancho came on or Rashford came on, they had the list already. I think they had the list of
I saw
penalty
that.
takers.
So
I think when you go into the huddle, I think you then say, look, we've planned for these 5. Yeah, Grealish, you fancy one, Sterling? I'm going to tinker a little bit. That could have been something that went in. Just on the penalty, I mean, Donnarumma was fantastic. I mean, he's a giant in goal, but fair play to Pickford. Pickford had a lot of critics in the semi-final, pulled out 2 fantastic saves, kept England's hopes alive, and poor Saka then, you know, went up, had a go, and so listen, I think you could, again, it's probably maybe improving the real-time decision making. They've had a blueprint, they've had a plan, and that's evident. They, you know, and that gets you so far, very well organized.
Maybe the next level. Maybe that's the next level. You know, Joe, just finally, like what great guys, Rashford, Saka, Sancho, all of them, not just them 3. Like, you were struck by how the English camp were so open to the cameras and showing like their gym sessions, their, you know, warm-ups, their little passing practices, you know, something that some of the GA teams and in the GA world could learn from a bit.
Ciaran, it's absolutely crazy. I know. Obviously, GAA players are amateur and their time is restricted because they've got 9-to-5 jobs and so on. But still, in all, you know, you can still give more access to your players in terms of interviews, in terms of other things. And you know, I tuned into a lot of those the beginnings of the training sessions that England were putting on YouTube, that were putting on Facebook, that they were putting on Twitter. And you know, you could see 20-25 minutes. It's really good for coaches, actually, because you could see Steve Holland, the assistant manager, he was in the middle and he was kind of dictating things, and you could see Southgate starting back, and he was letting Steve Holland you know, take the lead role, and he didn't really get involved himself, you know, Southgate, which I thought was really, really good. And you know, that could, you know, a lot of GAA managers who are managers could learn to maybe take a step back, observe things from a distance, and allow their assistant manager or their other coach or other coaches to get in and to get more involved in it. So that's one point of it. But the other point is the openness of the England team, you know, to allow them. Obviously, we didn't see any of the tactical setup stuff, but you know, GAA managers could learn, you know, from this, I would say.
Yeah. Joe, is that a subliminal message to me that I didn't give you enough responsibility or something? I didn't let you take the practice.
2 years too late.
Too late now. Ross, I mean, we won't discuss it on this, but I mean, the scenes outside Wembley before, during, I mean, the country has basically given up the opportunity to host the World Cup 2030, really, because England were favourites to be given that. And I mean, the difference between what this young football team now are looking to represent and the fans who sometimes support them, sometimes boo them, sometimes, you know, act like louts, it's stark.
Yeah, I mean, let's be really honest about this. Just going back to the players, I mean, the good thing about this squad and the management is the professionalism they have going into tournaments and all around the camp. You think years ago, people
Yeah.
like Gaza, Sheringham, the scandals that used to come out before tournaments and the English players, it was a bit of a laugh, even though they were top class players. Now things are dealt with very professionally, and the squad are in massive credit in terms of that. The fans, or the minority, or however many percentage of the fans who are seen in London the day before, getting, you know, absolutely smashed, causing issues with police, fighting, violence, etc. The racist stuff we've seen, the stuff at the stadium, people trying to break in, young kids, 18, 19, old people, you know, 56. I've seen so many videos that you just wouldn't even want to show your kids because it's disgusting. And it's a reason why the majority of the world can't stand England, and it's a shame because the team don't represent that. And all I'm looking at is from a football perspective that this team have done themselves proud in this tournament amongst lots of other teams. They've contributed to a fantastic tournament, yet the only thing we're speaking about is the hooligans and the yobs of the people that live in England who supposedly want to support their team. So it's disgusting. There needs to be a massive overhaul and some sort of change to this culture. I don't know how it's going to change, where it's going to come from, because it's been going for years. But if it doesn't happen, England are going to be seen in the same light, and it's just a shame. It's just a massive shame.
Yeah, they maybe they could start with a change in 10 Downing Street, and that might help, might spark a little bit of change for the whole environment.
Maybe Kears, but these people have been going to football matches and fighting for years and causing these issues. So I agree the politics has had so much to answer for, but you know, there has to be some consequence for this behaviour, even if it's no England fan can go to any games for a year, or certain players say, I'm not playing for the next two games because it's not fair that we get abused, something like that, because you know, who's going to take notice at the minute of a UEFA fine? People don't care,
no. And I think that's the key, is that there has to be repercussions. So like even the Wembley, you know, stadium announcer saying, apparently a few people got in. Like, you listen to the journalist Miguel Delaney and some of those, like they were saying as it happened what was going on, and people coming up to him and saying, we need the police here, and you know, all that kind of stuff.
There was people who supported England being violently abused by people trying to get into the stadium for a number of different reasons. I saw a kid who got hit, a 10-year-old kid who got punched by a man, must have been 55, 60. This stuff, these people should be in prison. They shouldn't be around. So
absolutely.
What do we do?
Yeah. Joe, Ross, what's your overriding memory and feeling from the tournament in general? Joe?
I would just say maybe Ciaran. For me, it was the beginning of the tournament. Obviously, when we seen what happened to Eriksson and the way the Denmark team, not only at that moment in time, obviously with their captain and Schmeichel as well, showing those leadership qualities. But then as they went through the tournament, obviously getting to the semi-final and staying together as a team, that for me was, you know, the big thing of the tournament for me.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, a nearly tragic but fascinating thing that happened with the players forming the ring around him, and all, led by the captain, Ross.
Yeah, I think for me it was the openness and the unpredictability of who is going to win this tournament. I mean, we saw very early on Italy were phenomenal all the way through, but coming into the tournament, they wasn't perceived as a top team that could go and win this. You had people like France, Portugal, Holland, even in the mix. England were obviously up there. I think it was fantastic to actually see a tournament where we didn't know, or we wasn't quite sure where the winner was going to come from. But you know, my wife's half Italian. I've been getting it in the ear how good they are. I have to hold my hands up. They were fantastic again, so I have to say Italy.
Yeah. No, the last few moments.
What was yours, Ciaran?
Just the last few moments of the whole tournament, where Italy, where Chiellini was lifting up the cup, and Mancini, who had a very poor Italian playing career, really, for the talent that he had. He was very unlucky with injuries and, you know, being dropped by managers and stuff. And my overriding feeling at that point, because the English thing had been done, was it's brilliant to have Italy back at the top of football. You know, that they weren't even in the last World Cup, Ross, weren't they not?
No.
So it was great just getting the big boys back in Italy, and the likes of them playing well and performing and all this is great for the game. You know, the calcio is always good to watch.
For sure.
Okay, lads, thanks for that. short and sweet, interesting episode. And thanks, listener, and thanks to ripped.app. Head over to delesportscience.com as well. We're just launching an online certificate in sports performance coaching, which I think will be really popular. So go onto the website and you'll get information about that. And until next day, good luck.